Okay, hi everybody, good morning and welcome to this CyberLab webinar where we'll be having a conversation this morning about the true cost of cybersecurity, comparing an in-house cybersecurity team to an outsourced MSSP. My name is Ryan Bradbury, I'm the CTO at CyberLab and I'm the host of today's webinar. I've worked in the IT industry for 19 years, working initially in a variety of IT roles before founding and running an MSP for 6 years. And in more recent years, I focused my career on cyber and the cyberspace, which is how I find myself at CyberLab today. I'm joined by my colleagues, Tom and Ben. So if I can ask you both to introduce yourselves and your areas of expertise, starting with you, please, Tom.
Yep, sure. So I'm Tom Davis. I'm CFO at CyberLab and I've been with the business for just over 2 years. Prior to that, I was Group Finance Director at Chess ICT and I've held senior finance roles in PLCs and large private organisations over the past 10 years. I'm passionate about helping educate people about finance and I hope I can give you some useful insights today from the perspective of a CFO.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. And the same question for you, please, Ben.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Ben Davison. I lead the managed services team within CyberLab. So I've been in the industry for the last 11 years. I've spent a lot of my time leading technical teams, hiring and recruiting new engineers. And so today, a little bit later on, I'll be talking about from an engineering perspective and a technical lead perspective, what is the challenges around build and buy.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. So just before I run through the slide deck and a few slides on company history, as we work through the webinar, if anybody has any questions, there should be a question mark icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen. So please feel free to ask any questions as we work through the webinar and we'll cover them all off at the end. So just to introduce CyberLab as a business, so CyberLab is the culmination of three separate cybersecurity entities which had all been previously acquired by Chess ICT. We have Chess Cybersecurity, who specialise in cyber software licensing, Armadillo, a CREST accredited pen testing business, and CyberLab, which is where I came from, and we specialised in Cyber Essentials and our in-house CyberLab Cloud Control Portal. We rebranded all three entities as CyberLab approximately 18 months ago. And as we talk here today, I believe we're a team of 66 individuals and we're scattered all across the UK. We're proud of the awards we hold as a business relating to vendors and frameworks, and we work with 12 key vendors from which we build tailored security solutions for our clients. Speaking of clients, we support in excess of 1,000 customers, ranging from small single-site businesses which may require only one specific product or service, to large NHS trusts requiring complex solutions involving input from most of the sales and engineering teams within the business. So I have a slide here to summarise the state of the cyber attack landscape. So more than 2/3 of medium-sized organisations experienced a cyber attack last year, which I think is a pretty terrifying figure, with a majority of those being phishing attacks. Phishing, as we know, is a common way to compromise and harvest credentials, from which a ransomware attack is often spawned. Still talking about ransomware, it's obviously has been in the news for a number of years and continues to increase in terms of the number of attacks and the total value of payments that are being made. Whilst these criminal gangs are making more and more from these activities each year, I think whilst that trend continues, the threat of ransomware is not likely to reduce anytime soon. And with the rise of AI, these attacks will become more sophisticated, more targeted, more effective, and ultimately more profitable for these cyber adversaries. What can we do about it? How can we reduce that risk? Well, it was announced earlier this year that the government are looking at ways of reducing or trying to reduce the amount of money that is paid out to these ransomware gangs. I read an article that explained that what is being considered is my payment, and in the private sector, making it law for a business to formally report when they have made a ransomware payment and the amount. From the customers I speak to at CyberLab, cyber is very much front and center in terms of focus and budget. So the conversation today is around how best to invest and approach cybersecurity. So the next set of slides within the webinar are split between the financial and technical aspects of the conversation points here today, and whether to implement a security team in-house or outsource. So Tom, starting with you, please. And from a CFO standpoint, can you comment on how you approach a budget for cyber and the metrics you look for in terms of enabling the business to make a decision?
Yeah, sure, Ryan. So we have a really good mix of attendees today, ranging between directors, business owners, and IT security managers. So I'm going to look at this from two angles. The first is what drives my decision making when I'm signing off budgets as a CFO. And as CFOs, we're relatively simple creatures. Most decisions that we make come down to three simple questions. The first is whether the investment will generate business growth, so that's a return on investment or better cash flow. The second is will it improve the culture of the business and help the well-being and talent? And the third is risk management and keeping the business safe. The issue for me in cybersecurity is that I think most people get bogged down on the first point, and they're continually trying to justify return on investment on cybersecurity spend. But in my opinion, great cybersecurity is not going to generate you a return. It's not something that we can put in a bank account to generate you interest, and it's very unlikely that it's going to generate you new customers or new contracts. For me, cybersecurity is there first and foremost to keep your business safe, and most importantly, to keep your business trading. The risk of poor protection is serious, and the average downtime after an attack is 26 days. Many businesses simply wouldn't survive this, and if businesses do manage to survive, the reputational damage is usually more hurtful than the downtime. So for me, as a CFO, the main issue that gets my attention is the duty of care to keep the business safe. However, when we're looking at this from a second angle, that's not to say that signing off on significant business spend is simple. There are various issues to consider, and with the current macroeconomic environment and what we're seeing in the news, many businesses are under increased budgetary pressure. So if you are an IT security manager, what can you do to help ring fence appropriate budgets? Well, the first is to make sure that your senior leaders are well educated on cyber. For senior leaders of businesses, I think that better education on the consequences of poor protection is critical. I've already mentioned the stats around business downtime and reputational risk, but poor protection will also make you uninsurable. And even worse, it can invalidate your policy in the event of a claim. And also in time, my view is that cybersecurity will be looked at in the same way as insurance and things like GDPR. It's not a nice to have, and other organizations simply won't want to trade with you if you don't have the right level of cyber cover. The second is using your business data to reinforce the message. The likelihood in some businesses is that the IT team are doing such a great job that the board are blissfully unaware of how regularly your networks are being prodded and probed. So make sure that any activity is being reported to your board and risk committees. The third is understanding the gaps in your cybersecurity posture. So make sure that you're producing regular summary reports to your board on the current cybersecurity posture with the associated risks of not being protected. I often see mature businesses that are not able to articulate this, and a professional document summarizing this will help with budget allocation. And my one and only plug today for CyberLab is if you do need support with this, CyberLab offer free posture assessments that will help review and summarize your business risk. Finally, understand the market rates and expected cash flows. So make sure you've done your homework on comparing the cost of your investment versus other products in the marketplace. Or if you are investing in people, most recruitment agencies will offer market rate guides so that you can compare the budgeted spend versus market rates. And last but not least, clearly explain the expected cash flows of your investment. And this will help speed up the process and show that you've evaluated the financials of your spend and they've been well considered.
That's great, Tom. I'll let you come up for air now.
Thank you.
So just one question on that then, Tom. So ROI, is ROI not an appropriate metric for cyber, and is it not something that you look at?
So it's a bit of a subtle message here, and obviously ROI is really important. But for me, the message is that return isn't really the focus for me. So evaluating the financials of investment is very important. As I've mentioned, you need to do your homework and prove that the cost of the investment is fair and it's at market rates. And also, if there is a solution that it has feature parity and it will generate you cost saving. And if that's the case, really make that clear. But I wouldn't try and waste energy trying to search for a return on this investment. For example, most people wouldn't ever dream of asking what the ROI on the cost of a legal counsel would be, or your insurance or your annual accountancy fees. And for me, cybersecurity protection falls into the same bucket.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next slide here just introduces the key areas of in-house versus a managed security service, Tom. So could you just elaborate on these points, please?
Sure. So Ben will cover this in more detail later as well. But as a really high level summary, in-house security means that you're running your own internal security teams. They're going to configure and monitor your cybersecurity defenses. And this will allow for more control and greater flexibility, but it does come at higher cost. For the managed security approach, it means outsourcing some, if not all, of your cybersecurity defenses. And there are a full range of complementary tools on the market that can be sold as bundles or standalone products. This means that organizations can ensure you're fully protected with little in-house knowledge, but it is less flexible, and it does mean that you can be locked into your selected approach for a long period of time.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. So from a financial perspective, again with your CFO hat on, which approach do you think is best?
I don't think there is a right or wrong answer on this one, and it really depends on the maturity of your organization. And that for me boils down to three key elements. So the first is, what budget do you have available? For example, if you don't have the budget for a team of specialists, then in-house isn't probably a starter for you. The second is how cyber mature your organization is. So do you actually have the in-house skills and knowledge to lead and get the best out of a team of specialists in-house? And the third is, what level of flexibility and control do you want over your cyber defenses? For example, if you are a business that has a very niche set of requirements, then outsourced products might not provide you with the exact type of support that you need.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So the next slide here, we have a summary of all the different factors in terms of a cost comparison. I think the standout for me here is incident response, and I believe the hardest aspect of building an in-house cybersecurity team is the challenge of ensuring you always have enough resource available around the clock to respond to a cyber incident. But what are the other key factors here, Tom, that stand out for you?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to say that the idea behind this slide is that you can refer back to it after the webinar. So I'm not going to sit and read every single line for you. But to build on the discussion we've had so far, for me, the key message is that building in-house provision does give you that greater control over your cybersecurity posture, but it will require a large upfront investment. And also, if you're looking to scale your business rapidly, it's going to really be difficult to keep the in-house team up with that level of growth. Also, the cost will be less predictable over time. And as you've already said, Ryan, if you have a cybersecurity incident, you're going to have to have really extensive disaster recovery planning. And also, it's going to suck out a whole load of management resource from your business if you do have an incident. So you need to make sure you've got a big enough team to be prepared for that. I suppose the other thing I want to make clear is that I'm not talking down the option of building your own in-house team. It's the right option for many organizations, but what we want to make clear is that it isn't a small undertaking. It needs to be planned with some detail. And if you do get the in-house approach wrong, the associated costs and risks of a breach are much likely to be higher than if you do outsource your cybersecurity support.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So I think that's a nice summary of sort of the pros and cons for each, but can you talk about maybe some of the hidden costs which often are not sort of factored in and planned for?
Yeah, sure. So as you've already said, there are some areas that I think people miss when they're starting on their initial plan. So with the in-house approach, we know that the current labour market's challenging in cyber, and staff retention and hiring are always going to be a constant challenge. And that can leave you exposed if somebody leaves the business and you can't plug that gap quickly. And if you do have gaps in your cyber defenses, this can increase the risk of bigger regulatory fines. And any gaps will almost certainly increase your cost of insurance. They could make you uninsurable, or even worse, I have heard of instances where people can't actually validate the claim that they've made against a breach that's occurred. A business have incurred serious losses as a result of that. On the managed security side, if you want the best commercial deal, it's likely that you're going to be locked in for a set period of time. So again, it limits your flexibility. And if your requirements do change, you could be faced with legacy costs for a system that are no longer fit for purpose. And whilst you can outsource most of your support to vendors on the managed security approach, you are still going to need some internal oversight to ensure that you're meeting your business requirements. And finally, as well as the risk of being locked in, you've got little control over the product features if you do outsource your cyber protection. So you need to make sure that this isn't going to create any unwanted gaps in your cybersecurity posture, which again, if those gaps open up, that's going to cost additional money to close down.
Thank you, Tom. So you mentioned when things go wrong. So there's a slide here. So just to finish off your section, could you just maybe share with us some real life examples of maybe where insufficient cybersecurity has resulted in fairly significant cybersecurity incidents?
Yeah, sure can do. And again, as I've said on the prior slide, there's lots of detail here. And the idea is, again, that you can digest this in your own time after the webinar. But in summary, gaps in your cybersecurity posture and not having the skills in your organization, whether that's contracted or via MSSP, are causing serious issues for large and well-known organizations. And these are only the tip of the iceberg and the breaches that we actually hear about. So there's a hell of a lot more going on under the bonnet here. So you've got skills gap breaches, and we've got some IBM 2024 reports that show over half of the breached organization faced significant shortages in staffing. So again, that's the risk we talked about, that if you do go in-house, you need to make sure you've got cover and succession planning to plug those gaps. And then we've got two real-life examples of Gloucester City Council and the British Library, where effectively they haven't picked up the issue, they haven't responded, and it's caused serious headaches for both businesses, which have taken months, if not years, to mitigate. So I think the final message from me today is, irrespective of which approach is best for your business, if you're a leader of a business, make sure that you're properly protected. The impact of a serious breach could be terminal for your organization. And if you're a security leader and want more budget, make sure your senior leaders are well educated on cyber. Make sure you're signposting any attempts to breach your defenses. And also make sure that any gaps in your posture are well documented and are provided to your board regularly.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Tom. On to you, Ben, if that's okay. So we've talked about the financial consideration points. So from your side, Ben, and from an engineering perspective, why is build much harder than buy?
Perfect, thank you, Ryan. So just as Tom said earlier on, I don't want to dissuade you from building your own engineering team. However, from my experience, there are some key areas in which building is more challenging. So in addition to some of the kind of hidden hiring costs that Tom's already mentioned, you've got to think about recruitment. So cybersecurity engineers are currently in huge demand, and when you put out a job advertisement, you will get quite a few CVs back, but a lot of those won't be engineers with cybersecurity experience. They'll typically be some network engineers or some internal IT support engineers, not directly with that cybersecurity experience. And so weeding through those CVs, taking the time to go through many different interviews to try and find a suitable candidate is going to be something you need to consider. Redundancy. So I don't mean redundancy as in staff, but I mean redundancy as in having that failover in terms of talent and knowledge. So here we're talking about security incidents, security alerts coming into the organization. And, you know, if you've got one or two of your engineers that are off sick or on leave, they still need to be proactively reacted to and investigation completed. So that means that you need to have that redundancy of staff and redundancy of knowledge in order to be able to cope. Training. So training is a key aspect, and constant training is a key aspect of an internal build security team. So they need to be trained on your set of products. You might have a new hire and they have a general cybersecurity knowledge, but they might not know about specific products within your organization. So for example, your endpoint, your firewall, etc. And with software as a service, SaaS solutions much more present, vendors typically do updates in the background. You don't always get notified of those updates. And so that means you need to be constantly reacting and doing more training to keep up to date with changes in those environments. Engineering ambition. So unfortunately, some of the best cybersecurity engineers are also the most ambitious. They may be lured away. They may want to move up in the companies. They may not be part of that core response team anymore. And this presents a challenge because you're constantly having to look at hiring costs, moving people within the organization, upskilling. So that means you haven't got that guaranteed planned engineering resource for the future because you just don't know what's going to happen to your engineers. And then speaking a little bit more about day-to-day activities, engineers need to understand not only the product itself, but what procedures look like for alerts and threats. So that means you need to internally develop your own playbooks, triage processes, etc., to make sure that when something comes in, when a major incident occurs, your engineers know what steps to take to resolve those. And then finally, it's commonplace in the business to utilize your staff across multiple functions. So the focus for those engineers is not always going to be on cybersecurity incidents. You know, from my own experience leading different teams, it's very easy for parts of the business to pull your engineering resource for other areas. So general networking changes, potentially even for office moves and builds and things. They have that kind of technical knowledge to help out with things in the data center, things in the server room. And so what you need is that exact focus when there's an incident occurs. And it's very easy when you've spent money building up a team internally to utilize them as best as possible across a lot of different functions. So having that focus, I think, is really key. And then also you've got out of hours cover. Unfortunately, major security incidents don't just occur 9 till 5. And I know some of your businesses are going to be 24/7 anyway, so you would already have an element of resource across that round the sun approach. However, not every business does. And unfortunately, cybersecurity works around the clock. Hackers and attackers will be there at any time and probably try and target you at a time when they don't think you've got that resource ready to react. So building out an out of hours team, someone that can react out of hours, or an on-call rota that you may have, is also going to cost you further money. Salaries are going to increase when staff want that kind of retainer for working out of hours. So it's something else to bear in mind. And then it's also worth noting about scalability as well. So when you look at building an in-house team, if you want to scale up your approach, you want to bring in, so say you acquire a new business, for example, that's then going to potentially acquire various other security products, other offices, other departments, which require maintenance. So scaling up that team means hiring more staff. It means maintaining that 24/7 coverage. And also you've got to then look at budgets. Whereas with an MSSP or a managed service, you can easily scale that during the life of the contract. If you bring on more products onto the service, then there would be an associated cost with that. However, it would be the same cost depending on however many staff or however many different units are within that product. So it's a per product and per user cost rather than hiring more engineers.
Thank you, Ben. Very good points, very comprehensive. So the next slide is on incident response. I think you can sort of lead this slide, Ben, and just introduce your thoughts around this one.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing and the most important thing is that you are only as strong as your weakest person or your weakest machine, unfortunately. And so usually and typically this tends to be leadership, tends to be kind of the CEO position, someone with different machines for everybody else in the business, someone who wants to travel a lot, is going to lots of meetings, maybe the security isn't quite as high. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, only you know who those people are. And so there's always going to need to be a personal response to an investigation or, unfortunately, an attack. And the speed of this response is key. So you might be relatively shocked to understand that actually, on average, 212 days for a breach to be detected internally in an organization. And you might think, how is that possible? Well, in actual fact, quite a lot of the time, attackers are not looking to disrupt. A lot of the time, they're looking to infiltrate and remove sensitive data, something that they may sell on the dark web, something they may use for a competitive advantage, for example, and they're also very good at covering their tracks. So sometimes it's very difficult to actually detect that breach. And the key focus when you do is to disrupt, to contain that particular attack, obviously to eliminate the attack and clean it up. But more importantly than all of those is to determine the root cause of any threat, to make sure that your security solutions are behaving as expected. And if there's any staff training required or in-house security knowledge required, that you determine where that's best placed. Unfortunately, a slow response equals more damage, more downtime, and more financial loss for the business. So I think my key question to everybody on this call is, what timescales do you have for a response? So if a major incident occurs, both in hours and out of hours, what timescales do you have? What is your expectations for your security engineers?
Okay.
And then moving on slightly from that, in a build scenario, typically the detection and responses are completely dependent on team member availability. So I mentioned this on the kind of previous slide. That focus is not always going to be there. So that's something that certainly isn't an issue with an MSSP, but it's something to bear in mind if you are building a team. A build scenario is also a disadvantage when it comes to threat intelligence. So as I said, with that training element, but also with keeping up to date with the latest threats, the latest information within the security industry, your engineers need to be up to speed on that in order to identify new and upcoming potentially zero-day threats. Another slightly shocking fact is that whilst the average ransomware can encrypt 100,000 files within the first 45 minutes, some of the fastest ransomware can actually encrypt the same number of files in less than 5 minutes. So we've been on this call for half an hour now. So, that's 600,000 files potentially within your organization that could have been encrypted. That's a file server and most of your endpoints encrypted just on the time that we've been on this call. So that's hopefully not too shocking, but obviously it makes you understand the importance of having that quick reaction times and making sure we're on and detecting things as quick as possible. So I've got some very quick key questions for you. Again, just other points to think about from an engineering perspective. So firstly, what happens in your business right now if a cybersecurity incident occurs outside of standard working hours? So briefly mentioned it on the last slide. Do you have a rota in place? Do you have a retainer in place for some of your engineers? If you have a 24/7 team, what happens if an engineer goes on sick at short notice? So if you have that rota in place, if someone goes on sick, do you have people to stand in? How do you adapt that rota? Third question, do your engineers have time to regularly upgrade and patch your systems? So as I briefly mentioned, some systems are software as a service, some are patched and updated by the vendor themselves. Others, for example, mainly firewalls, internal systems you have in your data center, for example, they require manual patching to resolve potential security vulnerabilities, but also general upgrades which add extra functionality and keep the system refreshed. Are your engineers doing that? What kind of time do they have? Do they have the knowledge to be doing those upgrades? Something to think about. Do you make sure the policies on your cybersecurity systems are set to best practice? So that's really important. From my experience, there's a lot of customers that we see, we jump on their firewall, for example, and they have 20, 30 firewall rules. 10 of those are just sitting there. They're not regularly required anymore. They might have been there for testing, but unfortunately, a lot of the time, those kind of test firewall rules more open than general rules. And so therefore you leave yourself in a position where actually unintended access might occur, and that's a light bulb moment for an attacker when they can get in quite simply with a method that you haven't clearly realized is still in place. But also your other security policies. So think about your antivirus policies, your web filter policies. Are they up to scratch? Have you reviewed them in the last 6 months? I think that's something worth thinking about. And then finally, is it possible there are rules and policy in your system which are no longer required? So as I said a moment ago with file rules, are you granting access which poses a risk? And then finally on this slide, I just want to mention that British Library example. So Tom's already mentioned it slightly, but in this particular incident, an attacker had access days before, and they covered their tracks well. So they gained access to the British Library systems. They ran scripts which removed all of the key identifiers that they'd been on the systems, any files that they'd generated, any scripts that had been run. So they removed their history. But the key takeaway from this kind of ransomware incident is how old the systems were. So the systems weren't regularly patched. The software was out of date, wasn't supported by the vendor. The network design was out of date. And this really hampered their recovery because in a lot of cases the vendors weren't able to support, and in some cases they didn't even have the hardware to replace, and so systems couldn't be recovered, so they had to build completely from scratch in some instances. I think this is where the real benefit of working with an MSSP is, because obviously they have that integration with the vendor, they know the life cycle of a product, and they can also advise from a general networking perspective how to improve and modernize your network, make use of things like SD-WAN, for example. That's really the benefit of working with an outsourced provider.
That's great, Ben. Thank you. So I was just sat here thinking about your point around ransomware and how quickly it can encrypt files, and just thinking about what I said earlier about AI and just where that's going to go, and whether these cyber gangs will start to embed AI in these strains of ransomware to be more targeted and granular and more focused in terms of the files that they start to encrypt on a network. So rather than just encrypting an entire device, then working onto a next device, will they start to incorporate AI to sort of spend more time to find the crown jewels on the network and hunt those out? And it's quite scary to think that AI probably will be used to make those much more aggressive and effective and faster too.
Absolutely, I think if attackers looking to make the most damage as quick as possible, encrypting boot files is probably a way to go, and they're going to get smarter and smarter. So it's really important to keep up your defenses at the same speed as they're improving their ability to attack.
Yeah. Great, thank you very much. So we have a slide here on compliance. So can you just explain why compliance is a major challenge and sort of how it fits into this conversation on Build or Buy?
Absolutely. So I think, as we all know, being compliant is not just about a moment in time. So you go through your ISO certifications, your Cyber Essentials certifications, GDPR, making sure you're compliant for that, but it's also requiring constant work. I think certainly from a build or buy perspective, a managed service could potentially help a company by making sure they're keeping all the components and solutions up to date. They're reviewing and health checking the configuration, implementing new security measures where possible, and obviously making sure that attacks are stopped within time. So that's something that a managed service or an MSSP would be doing anyway as part of a potential contract. But I think it's important that, as I mentioned on the previous slide, some of these things internally are missed, and that puts you at a risk of being uncompliant. It also puts you at risk in a situation of a potential breach, because organizations are going to look to see whether you are meeting that compliance and whether that was a potential risk in terms of why a breach occurred. And I think if we look at this example at the bottom around the MOD, so they were recently fined £350,000 by the ICO for failing to secure personal data. What actually happened in this incident was an email was accidentally sent to about 250 different personnel, but in the to field rather than the BCC field. Now, relying on users to send things via BCC isn't particularly best practice. You know, user mistakes occur in all businesses. So what the value of an MSSP in this instance is looking at your network holistically, looking at your security holistically, and looking at how we can bridge and mitigate potential gaps or challenges within the organization. So if we take this example on face value, you know, we could advise something like looking at a potential DLP or a secure messaging system to make sure that these kind of incidents did occur, or if they did occur, then they would be stopped at one of the security solutions rather than causing a potential breach.
That's great. Thank you, Ben. So to sort of summarize your slides, what do you think are the key decisions when trying to decide whether to build or buy?
Absolutely. So as you can see on screen, we've got kind of 5 key areas really here. So we've got people. So as I mentioned in that first slide, are you able to hire, train, and retain that top talent, or do you need instant expertise? Scalability. How is your business going to grow? Can your security solutions and your security resource grow with the business? Or is an MSSP more agile, more helpful at this moment in time? Incident response. Do you have that kind of 24/7 monitoring in place? Do you have rapid response? Do you have the ability to respond quickly to an incident? Compliance. Are you fully prepared for regulatory audits and ever-changing standards? Are you compliant as of today? Do you need help making yourself compliant? Do you need help working towards a certification such as Cyber Essentials or ISO 27001? And then cost efficiency. Are you investing wisely, or will some of these hidden costs that I mentioned earlier, that Tom mentioned earlier, catch up with you? Will they cause further problems down the line, and can you mitigate those costs by working with an MSSP?
Great. Thank you very much, Ben. So we have a slide here just to really summarize some of Tom's points and Ben's points around financial predictability versus risk. So an in-house security team, we are likely to experience high upfront costs in terms of recruitment and training, and unpredictable longer-term costs in terms of staff turnover, new tools required, changes to compliance in the cyber threat landscape. And then on the MSSP side, low onboarding costs, quick to onboard and start to provide service, and a fixed cost across a longer term. So that's really just a very quick summary. Have a slide here, risk versus responsibility. So I suppose one thing we haven't really touched on is there a halfway house approach here, Ben? Is there a hybrid solution to all of this? And what are the considerations if somebody was maybe looking at a bit of a hybrid approach, utilising their in-house IT team whilst also harnessing an outsourced MSSP as well?
Absolutely. So I think absolutely right. We haven't touched on that yet. So a hybrid approach is incredibly useful. So you may already have some cybersecurity personnel, but they're incredibly busy. They can't always be there for every single incident, and they might not always have the expertise to diagnose and resolve certain issues. So this is where that kind of hybrid approach really helps. So you would keep that cybersecurity intelligence, that knowledge within your team of your own internal systems, but also then supplement that with kind of almost an addition to that team being kind of a lighter touch MSSP offering, where you can escalate potential security issues, you can escalate concerns, challenges, support issues to that MSSP team. They would be still there to monitor your systems and obviously assist with any issues, but it would be kind of a joint approach. And that would also mean that the responsibility and the risk, as shown on this slide, is kind of shared. So if you were having an in-house build team, the entire responsibility, the entire risk would fall on your shoulders. And some businesses are not always there and ready to own that risk. And as I said on previous slides, they haven't recently reviewed their configuration, and sometimes that can come as a little bit of a shock. So I think that key question there at the bottom is really important. Can your team handle the full security responsibility, or do you need some additional expert support? And that's where that hybrid approach can really help.
So I suppose in that hybrid model, the key thing is really to set and define the parameters in terms of where responsibility starts and ends in-house, and where it starts and is picked up on the MSSP side as well.
Agreed. And I think the important factor with an MSSP is that when you sign up with a company such as that, you would be signing up to terms, you'd be signing up to certain SLAs, and so that would define their engagement with you and define your expectations of them. So for example, if you had a priority 1 incident, you might have an SLA of 1 hour with that MSSP. So you would have that expectation that 24/7, if an incident occurred, they would be jumping on that within an hour, and they would be either engaging yourself or looking at a root cause analysis, trying to clean up that malware within that period of time. But you have that reassurance that you've got an extra pair of hands, an extra resource to help you in a difficult situation.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. So next slide here, how to make the right investment, and just a little bit of summary of some of the cyber incidents that Tom and Ben have touched on. The one I always think back to was a cyber incident from, I think it was Christmas 2021, and it was Travelex. And in my opinion, it's probably one of the worst responses to a cyber incident that I've ever sort of heard about, in terms of a large business, and sort of how they chose to respond and try to contain the incident. So I think it was Christmas 2021. I ordered some holiday currency, and I needed to log into my Travelex account to do something, and the website said it was down, undergoing maintenance. So I think I left it a few days. I tried a supermarket and a bank. What I hadn't realised is lots of the supermarkets and banks are underpinned by Travelex, so they use Travelex as a broker to process all these currency transactions. And for well over a week, if not 2 weeks, they were basically trying to blame or trying to imply that the website was offline for website upgrades, and all their brokers, all the banks were unable to process any transactions because of infrastructure upgrades. It was just a really poor response, but it had such a significant impact on Travelex. The business went into administration 7 months after that ransomware attack. They were just unable to recover from the outage and couldn't rebuild their systems in time. So that is just one example that I always think back to, where the eventual consequences were just absolutely terrifying. So the next slide here then, Ben. So if customers are looking to buy, what sort of services does CyberLab offer?
Perfect. So as Tom's been saying through his slides, I don't really want this to be too much of a sales pitch. However, I think it would be wrong for us to do this webinar and not talk a little bit about what we could deliver and how we could help you as a business. So as you can see from the screen, we have 3 distinct offerings. So the first of which is a standard support offering. So this is not a managed service, but this is a support package effectively. So really here we would be offering direct support on particular products, and from us you would get direct access to a team of fully trained specialists. Would you be able to utilize our partner relationships, and we have platinum partner relationships with quite a large number of our vendors, and our team would have a direct login to your system. So if that was a firewall, that would include a VPN setup, but if it was a kind of a SaaS solution, it would be a direct login to that solution. So that would mean if you called us and said you've got this issue, we could jump straight on and investigate it on your behalf. We would need to have remote sessions, for example. But effectively, that's a standard support package. That's our least expensive package, but it doesn't offer a managed service wrap. It's purely a reactive support package. And then moving on to the one in the middle. So this is probably our most popular package. So this is our managed security support package. And so here, as well as everything that's included in the standard support package, you'd also be getting proactive monitoring. So our team would be doing taking SNMP traps and email alerts from your system and proactively monitoring for threats, for incidents from your system, and we'll be jumping on and looking at those in real time. We'll be taking system backups and potentially doing a restoration if that was required. We'll be doing upgrades and patching to your systems. And then kind of the key USP of our service is something we call quarterly advisory sessions. So once a quarter, we'll be effectively doing a mini health check of your entire system, and we'll be looking for key areas where we believe we can harden the security of your tenant or your firewall or your environment. And then we'll be presenting those in a report and also on a call to yourselves to show you why we think those changes should be made, how they would improve the security of your system, and any considerations you need to make for things like downtime. And then we'd look to book those changes in with you, so that you can then see over the period of the contract with ourselves how the security of your environment has improved, and you're making proactive steps to improve that security alongside ourselves. And as part of the contract, you'd also get 5 elective changes per month. So these might be changes that we recommend on those quarterly advisory sessions, or it could be any change that you would like us to make to the system. Alongside that, you'd also get automated reports that we can configure for you. And there's also, from an exciting perspective, some other features coming extra free of charge to the managed support as well. So as a little bit of a kind of an insider, 2 of the things we've got coming soon are 2 elements of our highly successful control portal. So you would get dark web monitoring, so access to advanced software scanning of the dark web for potentially compromised business credentials, and also recon scan, which is our newest element of our control platform, and this would help you get a picture of your attack surface and scan all online assets for known vulnerabilities. So that's our most popular offering, managed support, and then we also have a slightly newer offering called our managed service package, effectively. And so this is a bundle of solutions, and it's your choice, however little or entirely you take of that bundle, and it includes licensing. So it's important to note that that support package and that managed support package that I previously talked about, they don't include licensing. They are bring your license, bring your hardware to the table, and we will offer that support or managed service wrap around it. In this case, we offer the licensing and the managed service included as standard as part of the managed service, as part of this bundle. So that bundle you have the choice of includes endpoint protection, mobile control or MDM, email protection, our full CyberLab control portal suite, and yearly posture assessments as well. So that's kind of a bundle inclusion within that managed service. And they're the 3 options that we have available. And if you've got any questions about those, or you want to talk about those in any more detail, please get in touch, and we'll have some contact details at the end.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Ben. So we are running out of time, but could you just maybe quickly summarize some of the key areas where a CyberLab service can add value to a customer's operations?
Absolutely. So first one, probably the most important, is trust. So we've been delivering managed services to all range of customers for the last 15 years. So all kind of industries, corporate, enterprise, public sector, all different sizes, and we've had some amazing reviews. Got 5-star Trustpilot as well. Ease of contact. So one of the things we pride ourselves in is the ability for a customer in a difficult situation to be able to contact us as easily as possible. So we're available via a dedicated phone number, via multiple different emails. We've got one primary that allows you to log directly into our ticketing platform, or you can have a login yourself to the ticketing platform to manage your support tickets from within there. It's also important to note we deliver everything in-house. So we can provide the licensing, the installation, the managed service wrap, so the professional services part of that. And CyberLab engineers perform all of those contexts, as well as other functions like pen testing, etc. So we don't outsource our support or a managed service or a pen test or anything like that. It's all done in-house. Specialists, so we have a fully trained team of cybersecurity specialists, constantly keeping their knowledge up to date. As I already mentioned on the previous slide, we also have very good platinum partner vendor relationships. So that allows you as a customer to gain our knowledge, our expertise, our relationships with the vendors, and the ability for us to jump in to some of the development teams and also help with change requests and potential bug fixes as well. And then also hours to suit your business. So as I mentioned, we have a 9 to 5 offering, but we also have a 24/7 wrap as well around that.
That's great. Thank you much, Ben. So that sort of concludes the slide deck. It wouldn't be a CyberLab webinar without some QR codes. So we've got a couple on this slide. One, more information on our website can be found around our MSSP offering with for further reading there. And we also have a QR code for a free security posture assessment. So that's with one of our professional services team, where they will spend some time, understand your environment, and produce a report to maybe highlight some of the weaknesses or gaps within your infrastructure. So on to questions. So I'll just have a quick look and see what questions we've been asked before I start firing these at Tom and Ben. So first question, what sort of cost are we looking at for CyberLab's MSSP service? So Tom or Ben, could you maybe just comment on the formula that we use in terms of how we start to define and build out a pricing offer for customers?
Absolutely. So if we look at build versus buy, if you're typically looking to buy, so if you're typically looking to build internally some cybersecurity resource, today, according to Glassdoor, you're looking at about £46,000 for a 12-month engineering salary. So that's not including things like pension contributions or benefits, etc. Buying an MSSP offers huge reductions on those kind of costs. Again, it'd be usually a yearly commitment, but what we'd be looking for to help make those decisions with you is the number of users you have, the kind of products you're looking to support, and what kind of usage that you're looking at for the service. But realistically, we would help come up with a bespoke quote for yourselves. So please do reach out and we can help you with that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Ben. And the second question we've had in is, what sort of timescales are we looking at? There isn't any mention of whether this is in-house or outsourced, but maybe could you just provide a summary of expected timescales for a customer looking to build an in-house cybersecurity team, and maybe expected timescales if they're looking to outsource to an MSSP like CyberLab? Absolutely.
So in short, building is going to take you a lot longer, as you might expect. So in terms of recruiting, there isn't a set timescale on how long it will take to recruit an engineer. Unfortunately, you don't know what kind of CVs, what kind of candidates you're going to get in. But even when you do manage to secure a good candidate, they may have an up to 3-month notice period. That's quite standard in the tech industry with their previous employer. And after that, then you've got a period of training to get them fully up to speed, and that can take anywhere up to around 2 months to get them fully embedded within your team, processes, playbooks, etc. You don't have that kind of challenge when you look to buy. So if you were to come to us or another MSSP provider, from the point of sale, we can get you onboarded incredibly quickly within a period of a few days. And then from that perspective, we would start working straight away with you, and we would already have that expertise in your product area. So there are certain massive advantages in terms of going with an MSSP in terms of the time to create that security knowledge.
Okay, That's great. Thank you, Ben. That's all the questions we've had, and we're actually right on time. It is 10:58. So just to sort of wrap up, thank you very much for taking your time out of your mornings to join us on this morning's webinar. We hope you found the conversations interesting and enjoy listening to some of the key consideration points there from a financial and technical perspective. Some of those you can perhaps relate to. We would love to keep the conversation going, so please reach out to one of us, to all of us. We'd love to continue the conversation with you. We will send out a follow-up email later on today. I haven't actually checked, but I'm sure we're happy to send out the slide deck to anybody who's interested as well. But that's all from us. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day.